Well, I'd like to begin by saying good afternoon to all of the airmen that we have here with us today in the Pentagon auditorium. I'm awfully glad to be here and awfully glad to be here with all of you. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and spend about the next hour with me. I also want to thank the airmen and maybe some members of the general public who may be joining us via the internet today. So welcome to all of you as well. I'm Debbie James, and I am so proud to stand before you today as the 23rd Secretary of the Air Force. I say from the bottom of my heart, it is the honor and the privilege of a lifetime, and I'm going to be working very hard alongside all of you to make the most of the years that we have together to put our Air Force on the course to being the best Air Force and continue to be the best Air Force in the world in the years to come. We have some other senior leaders here today that I'd like to take just a moment and recognize. First, we have our Undersecretary of the Air Force, Eric Fanning, who did an absolutely fantastic job being our acting secretary for the last 7 months, I believe. It feels like 7 years to Eric, but I think it was only 7 months. So thank you very much, Eric Fanning. We have our Vice Chief. We have General Spencer here today. We have Mr. Byland. Where are you, Tim? There's Mr. Byland, our Administrative Assistant to the Air Force. Some of you may have seen him and me together in the Air Force Times, where I took the oath of office. That was in this week's Air Force Times. I just want all of you to know that was the immediate ceremony, but there will be an official ceremony by the Secretary of Defense in just a couple of weeks. So if any of you are available, we might have a few extra spots. Drop me an email, and I'd love to have you come join me. Some were concerned that Tim wasn't high level enough. Well, he's pretty high level to me, but anyway, there's more to come on that. Thank you, Tim, for being here. General Jackson of the Air Force Reserve, where are you, sir? Thank you for being here, General Jackson. Lieutenant General Hogue, thank you for being with us. Chief Cody, there's the chief right there in the front, and we have lots more as well. So again, thank you one and all. I thought what I would do today with your indulgence is really talk to you about 4 different topics, and then we'll have time for questions and answers, because I'm told that y'all are not a shy group, so I think we'll have some time for Q&A, and I will certainly welcome that. But the 4 topics that I would like to cover today is, first of all, me. I'd like to tell you a little bit about me, my background, where I've been, and where I hope to go. Number 2 is my priorities. That's the where I hope to go part. It's where I hope we can go together in the next few years, what we should focus on in the Air Force. The 3rd topic is put on my, or get out my crystal ball a little bit and project as best as I can what the next couple of years might mean for us and the types of things that we can probably expect to see and the challenges that we'll face as an Air Force. And then 4th is a little bit about my personal philosophy, just because that's a little bit of knowledge about what makes me tick, and it'll also give you an idea of the way I look at things and the way I make judgments and so forth. So those are the 4 topics that I'd hope to cover, and then again, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So of course, the first topic is me. So here's a little bit about me. I will tell you that I was born and raised in the great state of New Jersey. And let me look out into the audience. Do we have any other Jersey people in the audience here tonight? All right, I see a whole bunch. I hope you're not from Fort Lee and you're getting stuck in those traffic jams, are you? No, me neither. And I just want to say up front, I don't know anything about it. I'm glad to know nothing about it. I am actually not from northern New Jersey. I'm from a place called Rumson, New Jersey, which some of you may have heard of, and it's on the shore. And really the way you can tell us Jersey people from the wannabes is we say the shore. We don't say the beach. We don't call the ocean or the beach the beach. We say the shore. And so I grew up near the shore in New Jersey, a place called Rumson. My 89-year-old mother still lives there, so I get back and forth regularly to see her. And it was a great place to grow up. I went there through high school. I went on to college, which was Duke University, and on to graduate school directly, which was Columbia University. And in those days, my dream was I wanted to be a diplomat. I wanted to be in the State Department. And all of my course of study was all geared toward international relations and preparing me, I thought, to be a diplomat in the State Department. And I studied Spanish, and I was immersed, and I traveled abroad, and I became quite fluent in Spanish. all with this goal of being in the State Department in mind. So I graduated from Columbia University with a master's degree and quickly packed up my bags from New York City, moved to Washington, D.C., got myself an apartment, signed a lease for a year, and then started looking for a job. So note to self, I'm now the mother of 2 children. I give advice to my children all the time. Not such a good thing to sign up for the lease without first having the job. So that was kind of a backwards mistake, but I did it. And I applied to the State Department, and I sort of sat back and waited for that magic job offer to roll in. And you probably know where I'm going with this story. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. They picked other people that year. They simply didn't pick me to go into the Foreign Service. And boy, was it devastating. You know, as a young person, you've got a dream. You don't even have a job. You've got a lease. What do? You've prepared all of these years, and now the dream is busted. So this was a big disappointment in life, but of course, because I had that lease, you can't be too disappointed for too long. You have to pull up your socks and get on with it. So I did, and I started interviewing elsewhere in Washington for positions, because I was interested in government service, was interested in public policy. And the year was 1981, and so guess who was hiring in the federal government in the year 1981? And of course, it was our own Department of Defense and the defense establishment. So that is when my dream shifted. I had to zigzag in life, and I went from doing the thing I thought I would be doing my whole life into quite a different field, which was the field of defense. And now, more than 3 decades later, that is where I have spent my professional life. Sometimes in government, sometimes in the private sector, and of course this job, I told you I'm so honored and privileged. This is the culmination of that period. And I tell you this story because looking back, I can't imagine that I could have had a better career that would have been more fulfilling to me and better for me than the one that I have had, even though it was not that original dream of being in the State Department. And I'll weave this in later on because there may be a nugget or two in this story that would be helpful to some of you. So anyhow, this 30-year career began. I began actually in the Department of the Army as a civilian GS employee. I then had an opportunity to go to the House Armed Services Committee, where I spent 10 years. Of course, that's one of our 4 major defense committees that reviews the defense budget, defense policy, and appropriations. And then I came to the Pentagon. This was in the 1990s. I was 5 years in this building, so I've had some previous Pentagon service. I spent my time as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Reserve Affairs, so that was the National Guard and Reserve Forces. And then I got out of government, and I went into the private sector, where I've been for the last about 14 years, mostly with a company called SAIC, which is a technology contractor that supports the entirety of the federal government, but especially defense. So mostly with SAIC, but I've also had service in nonprofits, and I've been on nonprofit boards that focus on people and military personnel issues. So for example, the USO and TAPS, which is the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, and the Business Executives for National Security. So that's been the last 14 years of my life. So you add all that up, it's 32 years or 33 years in total, which is really pretty cool because, of course, I started when I was 7, in case any of you people are math majors in the audience. There's always a few of you, I know. But if you add all that up, besides the number of years, the thread that has always linked my various jobs and my interests and my passion together in the defense arena has really fundamentally been about people. All of these jobs very much related to people. On the Hill, my specialty was military personnel and compensation for most of those 10 years. In Reserve Affairs, it was the whole plethora of issues, but it was so much about our National Guardsmen and reservists. And when I transferred into the private sector, I could tell you terrific technology programs that I was responsible for managing, but ultimately it was about the people who were working on those programs. Were they the right people? Were they the smart people? Could we retain them? Were we developing them? So it's ultimately always coming down to people for me, and I firmly believe that people are the core of every great organization. And certainly that's exactly the story of the Air Force, and it's a story that I can't wait to be able to tell increasingly to the outside world. So that's a little bit about me. Let me now shift to what my priorities are for the future. And of course, I just talked to you about my fundamental belief that people are everything. So it's not going to be surprising to you to know that I have 3 priorities, and people's right up there. That's priority 1. We have to take care of our people in the future. And what does that mean to me? Well, that means we need to continue to focus, and if anything, double down on the focus when it comes to recruiting, retaining, and shaping our force for the next years ahead of us, 5 to 10 years ahead of us. And of course, when I say the force, I'm talking about the active duty, the National Guard, the Reserve, and our civilian workforce. I'm talking about all of it, and there's lots of work to do there. Number 2, within the people realm, is we've got to make sure that we're compensating people fairly. And we've been through certainly a very tough patch for our civilian employees. The sure compensation is on the mind of our military members as well. The key is we've got to make sure that it's fairly, that it keeps up. Though I would predict that the growth, certainly in military compensation of the last decade, we certainly are not going to replicate that in the next decade. But we've got to stay competitive, and it's got to be done fairly and correctly. A third thing I would put under people is we've got to make sure that within our leadership ranks we're growing very much diversity of thought, bringing new thoughts, new ideas to the table so that we can continue to evolve. We've got to make sure we protect the most important family programs, find the right balance between our active, Guard, Reserve, and civilian employees as we're shaping the force. So these are some of the important people programs. But again, number 1 is people, and it all comes down to having the right people who are working on our programs and supporting our Air Force. The second priority is that important balance between the readiness of today and the readiness of tomorrow. So you all know what I mean in this room by the readiness of today. This is everything from the training and the flying hours for our squadrons out in the field. It's making sure that you have the right equipment, the right training to get your jobs done so that you could get the job done for us. And that's right here and now, and it's today. And that readiness has suffered over time. It's especially suffered in this past year, and we've got to right that situation as quickly as possible. The readiness of tomorrow, to me, really talks about some of our modernization programs. And I know you guys have all been reading about the F-35 and the new tanker program and the new long-range bomber. These are the top 3 modernization programs for the Air Force, but there are a number of other programs as well that will innovate for us. They'll be the technology of the future, and again, we need to have the right balance and protect those so that we're not just doing for today and we're not just doing for tomorrow. We've got to do both so that those 2 things remain in balance. So balancing today's readiness against tomorrow's readiness is the second priority in my list of 3. The third is we need to make every dollar count for the taxpayer. And I thought this was just a great theme. And then one day the vice said to me, "Ma'am, that was my theme. That's been my thing." And you're right, it is General Spencer's theme. But I'd like to embrace it and work with him on that because I think it's so terribly important. And even in days of rising defense budgets, I mean, it's always our job to deliver the best value for the taxpayer, right? But it's especially important in these days. So every dollar needs to count. So what does that mean to me? That means I'm going to look to get involved with some of these big programs and do program reviews. You know, I come out of industry. I kind of know how to do that from the other side. So looking at these program reviews to try to make sure that we don't go over cost, over budget, and so forth, because that hurts us in the eyes of the taxpayer. So we got to try to keep those on track and deliver the best value. So I'll be pursuing these 3 priorities both here in Washington as well as when I travel. And by the way, I will be traveling in the field. I can't wait to get out and see some of our airmen and learn more directly about their missions and hear from them directly, just as I'm going to be hearing from some of you directly here today. Okay, so those are the priorities. So now if I get my crystal ball out and I try to project out for the next few years, what are some of the things that I am seeing out there that are relevant for all of us here in the Air Force? Well, the first thing I see is we're going to continue to go through change. And for everybody in the room and beyond who hates change, and we all at some level or another hate change, right? I got to say sorry, guys, because we're going to have more of it. And if you think we're the only group, we're not. Again, I'm coming from the outside, and we were constantly changing in my company. I don't know of an organization that isn't in a constant evolutionary phase. So there will be more change on our horizon, but to me that means there's lots of opportunity. That's the way I look at it. Lots of opportunity. And why is there lots of opportunity? And I'll just put it in very simple terms. Today's military, today's joint force, every combatant commander that we have cannot do the work of the force without the Air Force, because we are fundamental to everything that goes on. You all know our 5 core missions. They are fundamental to everything that goes on. So there is nothing but opportunity out there for us, because the whole mission cannot operate without us. It's plain and simple to me, and that's the core of it. So lots of change, but lots of opportunity, because nobody can get by without the U.S. Air Force. Number 2, we're going to see a continuing winding down of the war in Afghanistan, thank goodness. And we're going to see a continual gradual shift in the so-called rebalancing to the Pacific. So you'll see in the next few years additional basing decisions, deployment decisions, and so forth, which relate to that basic rebalancing. That does not mean that we're getting out of Europe or that there's going to be nothing going on the East Coast. It doesn't mean that. It's a shift. It's a shift in priorities, but of course we're the U.S. Air Force, so we go anywhere that we're needed, whether that's in the Pacific or not. But you will see, because that is part of our strategy, you will see a continuation of that shift. And by the way, talking about people deployed and overseas and whatnot, I had so wanted to be confirmed in time so that I could go and at least have a brief stop and see some of our troops overseas, particularly some of our airmen in Afghanistan. And I didn't get confirmed in time, so I tried to do the next best thing. I called just a handful of people, but nonetheless I called them over the holiday period, and it was very uplifting. It was very uplifting to hear about morale, how well they're doing. They're motivated. Of course, they're anxious to come home, but with modern technology and Skype and the rest of it, they felt pretty well connected across all those many thousands of miles to their family. So it was uplifting to me that they are doing as well as they are doing. The next factor, and this is one that may be on the minds of many, is this reshaping of the force. So we're going to be dealing with that over the next several years. So what does that mean? That means we're going to be a smaller Air Force. We're probably going to be smaller in all of our components: civilian, Guard, Reserve, and active duty Air Force. But the key is to make sure the right people are in the right jobs, that we've got the right categories of people at work and doing the work that the country needs done. So it's a big job to get that right. The projections are up to 25,000 reductions in personnel over the next 5 years or so, and numbers of aircraft will be coming down as well. So it's been announced that we are implementing a series of initiatives basically targeted at all of the components, which are designed to encourage voluntary separations in certain categories. And if those get us the numbers that we hope to receive from those initiatives, then we're done. If they do not, then there may be involuntary activities that are put in place. So that's what's going on. I know that this has got to be unsettling to many of you. This is the kind of change which could mean a career change. It could mean that you are going to retrain into a different specialty. It could mean that you would end up leaving the Air Force that you loved. And the reason why I took a few minutes in the beginning to tell you that State Department story is because I firmly believe from that experience and lots of others I've had in life that one door may close, but always, always, always another one opens. And so my advice to you at a time like this is don't be shy. Reach out to your supervisors, reach out to your commanders, to your mentors, and go on the offense. Ask them questions. If you don't have enough information about your specialty and what is likely to happen in your career field, go on the offense and ask questions until you get answers. We're going to be transparent. That's our job. We're going to be transparent and get you as much information as possible, as quickly as possible, so you can make these judgments. But for heaven's sakes, manage your own career, so to speak, and take the reins so that you can make a good judgment on how to proceed with your own careers. Basically, seize the opportunity. Don't be afraid of the opportunity, because you'll be better off for it if you embrace the change. The other thing that we're going to see on our horizon over the next few years is just the general budget environment. It's going to remain difficult. Good news of late, of course, and that is that they got a budget deal, which will mean some relief from the sequestration mechanism, which is excellent, and some relief from those numbers, at least in the near term. So we'll get a little bit more budget than we projected for next year. So that's good news, but it doesn't mean that every last issue can now be addressed. It does not mean that at all. It's still going to be a very tight budget environment. And by the way, presenting, defending, discussing the budget will certainly be a big issue on my plate. That'll be a big part of my job, along with the Undersecretary, the Vice, and the Chief of Staff. We will be up on the Hill a lot telling the Air Force story. So, you know, that story to me is going to involve, we need to restore readiness. We need to, of course, go through the force shaping that I talked to you about. There may be some fleets of aircraft that will be retired. Certainly we will come down in the number of aircraft. We need to continue to emphasize that we're going to stamp out sexual assault and sexual harassment in the U.S. Air Force. These are some of the themes that I'll be talking about when I go up on the Hill, and also about the modernization programs of the future and our top systems that we need for the readiness of tomorrow. So again, just to give you a flavor, these are some of the themes that I'll be working on. Lots to do, lots to learn. Again, many, many opportunities await. So I like to not just focus on challenges, but focus on the opportunities. Nobody can get by without us, and that's a good position to be in, since our ultimate job is to support the warfighter. All right, now let me shift to kind of my philosophy. So I have my 10-point plan, you might say, or the top 10 lessons that I've learned in my life. And I offer these up to you because it is sort of a window into my thinking, but I have found that these have been helpful to me and good for me in my personal life, in my professional life, as an individual contributor when I was more junior in my career, and they certainly have served me well as I've been more senior and a leader in my career. So I'll also try as I go through to put these lessons learned in what I think it means for the Air Force today, like the context, in other words, for the Air Force. So my first lesson learned, it was early in life, and that's sort of be prepared to zigzag. So that was that State Department story. Life throws you curveballs. I bet you everybody in this room's had a curveball or two, personally and professionally, and if you haven't, you will. So be prepared to catch that ball and run with it, and seize that opportunity and make it work for you. Now, in the Air Force, what I think that means is there's going to be a quick pace of change, so we have to be agile, we have to be prepared to respond. And I also think it means we can't constantly and endlessly worry about coming up with the perfect 100% solution, because we have to be quick, we have to seize those opportunities. So, when we've got an 80% solution, for heaven's sakes, let's go with it. And that brings me to lesson learned number 2, and this is the one time when an 80% solution is not good enough. That one time is when it comes to ethics and doing the right thing. And I say this to you, that ethics in all areas, that's care for the taxpayers' money, it's taking care of one another, and dignity and respect for all in all that we do. It's the whole panoply of doing what's right, because ultimately at the end of the day, all you have is your own good name, the good name that reflects upon your family, and the good name of our Air Force. So we must never, never squander that. So ethics has always got to be 100%, but seize that opportunity to go with the 80 or 85% solution is lesson 1, but 100% on ethics. The third one, I've always believed in seeking out a mentor, somebody who can help you along, who can advise you. And then when you get to the stage in your own career, pay it forward, turn around and do it for other people. And I think that's especially important in the Air Force these days because there's going to be questions about what to do and which way to go for some people. And so talk to the people who you know, who can give you that advice. Could be a commander, it could be a buddy, it could be a coworker. But talk to people, seek out a mentor, and then be one and help your folks as well. Fourth is build and value a network inside and outside of the Air Force. And by that I mean your own colleagues, I mean the joint world, people in the Navy and the Army who have different ideas, some of which can help us in a variety of ways, and be open to new ideas. So that's kind of taking care of one another and networking both inside and outside of the Air Force to help us advance our goals. Fifth is build competence. So, we have to be competent at what we do, and you're never fully competent. There's always continual learning, in my opinion. So don't ever give up on education, training, learning from one another, self-awareness. And again, sometimes retraining is in order, right? So sometimes that's a part of continual learning, is just shifting gears and trying something new. 6 is communicate, the importance of communications. And boy, is that ever important nowadays, so that we keep informed about what's going on. And I always like to say that at least 50% of communications is listening. Be a good listener. Listen to other people. Take it in. Don't just jump at a conclusion, but gather the facts and listen. And by the way, I like to think of myself in this regard, and I would welcome emails or suggestions or anything from this crowd as we go forward, because I for sure don't have all the answers. 7 is be a role model on and off duty. So that's basically behave yourself in all ways as you would hope that other people would behave. 8 is be upbeat. So that's positive thinking, positive leadership. You can look at the next several years and you can say, oh, the budgets are hard and this and that and we're going to get smaller, or you could see the opportunities for it. And I guarantee you, you'll be better off if you see the opportunities, and if you're a leader, your people will definitely be better off because you can help them find the way. 9 is persistence pays off. It certainly has in my life. I've gone through many job changes. You got to remain persistent with it, and I think, at least for me, the persistence of this year is going to involve that budget, telling our story to Congress, not getting tired, keep on going. Persistence will pay off. And then 10, very importantly, so don't take this as last just because I've listed it as 10. Along the way, be sure that you have fun, and be sure that you love your family and have balance and have interests outside of the workplace. So along the way, on my 33 years of the professional life I told you about, I have a wonderful husband. I have 2 beautiful children who I adore. They're now 29 and 27. So for all of you who have little people at home, watch out. They grow up to be big people just like that, just like that. But family and friends and getting some rest is very important, as well as hobbies. And I'm a big believer in that. And I hope sometimes we're workaholics in this building and in this Department of Defense. I think we just need to all take that to heart. Well, I want to now close out and just sort of tell you what I told you in the beginning, which is just how very proud I am to be here, how very proud I am of our Air Force. Because no matter what your job is, whether your job is launching a satellite in Florida, or standing watch on a missile silo out in the Great North, or if you're involved with the refueling mission in the Pacific, whether your job is preparing policies right here in the Pentagon, working on our policies going forward for the Air Force, no matter what your job is, you should be very proud of what you do. I think the nation is very proud of you, and as I said, the military and our security can't get by without all of you. So Please remember that. For those of you who may be listening in who are not here today, please know that I'm going to be coming your way, I hope soon. I'm really, really looking forward to traveling. I have been to 2 locations so far in my, 3 weeks. They were very brief trips. The first one was rather sobering and sad, but it was an honor to be part of it. We had Captain David Lyon, who was a logistics officer, was killed by an IED in Afghanistan just after Christmas. And so he came home to Dover, and I went there and met with his family and participated in what is called a dignified transfer at Dover. So again, sad occasion, but he's home now with his family, and they're looking for peace. My second trip was actually attached to a vacation. I was on vacation, but I was on the West Coast, and I was able to drop by the Los Angeles Air Force Base. So if anybody's listening in from Los Angeles, thank you for hosting me. I had a wonderful time. It was only a couple hours. I learned a little bit about the space missions that they are supporting out there. But the good thing about short trips is you get to go back. So I'll go back there, but there's lots of other places to go. And I just can't wait to get out and meet more of our airmen. I want to thank you again for being here today and tell you that I'm looking forward to your questions. I meant what I said about if you think of things later on and you have questions or comments or suggestions. I'm on the internet system, or I'm on the Pentagon email system, which works some of the time, right, Chief? I think, Vice, it does some of the time, so please feel free to do that as well. And again, thank you for joining me here today. All right, who's first? Is that Dave Spar I see in the audience? I'm seeing familiar faces from long ago. Dave was my military assistant when I was Assistant Secretary of Defense Reserve Affairs. So good to see you, Dave.
Pleasure to see you.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Lieutenant Colonel Chris Supinor, Operations International Law Directorate. You projected, the future for the Air Force. You talked about a smaller Air Force, about tough fiscal times, and as we go through that transition, I guess the question is what is the Air Force mindset? Because we've been through drawdowns before, very significant ones. And is the mindset going to be more with less, or is the mindset going to be recognizing mission sets that we can no longer perform and informing Congress and informing leadership that, hey, if we are smaller, we have less capability, there's less things we can do, and these are what those are?
So let me answer this question in a couple of different ways, and then please, if anybody else here in the front row has ideas, to please jump in as well. But the first thing I'd like to throw in to the mix here, and I believe this is already underway, we certainly went through this effort in our own microcosm when I was in industry, is when you're reducing the number of people, you've also got to reduce some of the number of tasks. And particularly when it comes to, I'll call them administrative type tasks, sometimes we forget why we're doing certain things. We've done them a certain way for so long, and you've got checkers who are checking the checkers who are checking the checkers. You get more oversight than you know what to do with sometimes. So we went through a major scrub in my company to try to reduce some of those layers and try to reduce some of those tasks. So that, if we are successful at that, and I believe we will be, that will be a certain reduction in things that have to be done. Now, when it comes to the core missions of the Air Force, and you all know the core missions, I can't imagine we will ever say, no, we can't, we're going to give up this particular mission. It may be that we have to give our best military judgment that we can't do that mission as completely as perhaps the commanders would like. Or it might take us more time to get there, things like this. But I cannot imagine, and by the way, that's our job to give that advice and to be honest about that. But I can't imagine we would walk away from any of the 5 core missions because they're so integral to the national defense. Yes, please.
Ellie Nywood from the Scientific Advisory Board. You mentioned preparedness for the future and modernization. What about R&D and S&T in that role?
So I think that's extremely important. R&D, I mean, that's the crux of our innovation for the future, S&T, R&D spending. So I have yet to delve into that extremely deeply. I got some briefings before confirmation just to get a little bit familiar with the topic. This is an area which I certainly believe our administration, the president is focusing on. So the answer without giving you specifics is absolutely. We have to make sure that those budgets are somewhat sheltered, not to say that they won't receive any scrutiny or any sort of reduction or scrub, but not everything will be decremented as much, and some things will get plussed up. It all just depends. But that's part of the readiness of tomorrow, is making sure that we keep that innovation and technology strong. Anybody else? This gentleman in the back either has a question or he's scratching his head. So I think you're scratching your head. Who else?
Yes, ma'am. Chris Mays from the Air Force History Office. What are your thoughts on BRAC?
My thoughts on BRAC. I think we need a BRAC. We have excess capacity in the Air Force. Our basing structure is somewhere between, I think, 20 and 25% too much. Again, coming out of industry as I do, this is constantly done in industry, reducing the cost of facilities, consolidating facilities and whatnot. It can be done quite easily in industry, not so easily in the Department of Defense. Of course, we must go to Congress and ask for legislation on that, and we have for the last several years, and it has not been approved. It's not a popular thing because, of course, it's jobs in different communities. People worry about the future and can the communities recover. And by the way, I think if you look at the various BRACs over the years and things that have closed, the communities have recovered, and many of them are prospering. But still, it's that nagging worry. And so it's a very difficult thing to get agreed to by Congress. So, if I were a betting person, I wouldn't bet the farm on this one that we'll get the authority, but I think we do need it, and I think we need to continue to press for it. Did you have a question, General?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you had a great session today with the National Commission on the Structure of the Air Force. I want to commend you on the great job you did. My question to you is, what question did you not get today that you wanted to answer?
Well, now, just by way of background, we have a commission on the future structure of the Air Force, which is a congressionally appointed commission. They're looking at a variety of ideas for the go-forward strategy for the Air Force, for our National Guard, our Reserve, and our active component, and how to split those missions up well. So I thought we would get asked about, does it make sense to merge the two components, the Reserve component with the Guard component. So I thought we might get that question. We did not. Had they asked me that question, I would have said, no, I don't think that makes sense. I think the better way to spend our time is to focus on some of the special capabilities that each of the components brings to bear, and focus on better working together and better integration. And of course, we did talk a lot about that, as well as the seamless ability to go between the three components, which it's not seamless today. I think it's better than it was 15, 20 years ago. We're not there yet, but there's a variety of initiatives that are sort of underway that we're working on to try to get us to that end state, to be much closer to that end state. So yes, that was actually my first public presentation was before that commission earlier today. Anybody else? Well, would any of you gentlemen like to say anything here? Chief?
So ma'am, I will. I have a wingman here. You guys got to carry the day, but No, really, ma'am, I've had the opportunity to spend some time with you prior to your confirmation, and certainly with the staff up inside the glass doors to hear your philosophy, to hear what you spoke to our airmen about today. And I really do appreciate your candor about the future of our Air Force. I think our airmen are sensing that, and we will get through it. We really will. The work-life balance discussion, as you know, is a real priority that I like to focus on when I'm out with our airmen, how we connect with each other and care for each other as we go through some of these difficult changes and life changes for some of our people. And maybe you can expound just a little bit on your own personal experience, as we have supervisors, we have commanders now that are going to have conversations with airmen and right now and into the immediate future about their future. How do you prepare somebody that wanted to be in your company, but then you had to go talk to them and say, we really like you and you're really good at your job, but we just can't keep you right now because what you do for us, we have too much of.
Mm-hmm. So the advice I would give, if you are a supervisor or a commander who has people in this category, just like I said, if you're an individual, same story for the supervisor, go on the offense. I hope most of you would know whether your people are in this category. If you don't, please reach out and try to find out. The information is rolling out, so I think everybody will know fairly soon. A lot of people already know. But reach out to them, go on the offense, and give them some advice. You know the kinds of things that are necessary and the kinds of specialties that we need in the Air Force. Try to suggest to them that they get interested in some of these career fields where we have underages so that they can retrain and get those jobs. If these are airmen or individuals that you think will not continue on in the Air Force, continue to help them anyway. And make sure you steer them in the direction of the various transition programs, and make sure that they can take some of these voluntary incentives, right, which can help launch them into a new world in the civilian life. And again, don't be a downer about it, is my advice, because one door closes, another door opens, and it'll be something different for them, but it's going to be the next big thing and the next big adventure. And that's the way we need to all look at it and to seize those opportunities. So pretty much it comes down to go on the offense. Don't sit back and wait. Don't wait for somebody to tell you. Go on the offense. If you're a leader, talk to your people and do your very best. And if you are an individual contributor, seek out your mentors, seek out your supervisor, your commander, and ask a lot of questions and get yourself positioned. And on the work-life balance, if you are a leader, tell your people to go home at a normal hour. And try real hard that you go home at something approaching a normal hour. And take your vacations. Take your vacations, because if you take them, other people will also take them. I was sworn in on December 20th, and I had been waiting for so long, and I had some vacation, right, in private life. And I'm like, great, let's get started. And then I realized, I was actually advised, but it was good advice. If I come in and start saying I want this and I want that and I want the other, what's that going to do to the family plans of lots of other people? And so I didn't. And you know what? Western civilization didn't end. We somehow got through. So if you're a leader, you got to lead by that example when it comes to the work-life balance. That's not always possible, right? Sometimes there are really, really important things going on, but try to make it possible. If you manage it, you can make it more possible than you think. Here we go. Now we're warming up, thank goodness.
Nyla Sakeen from A2R. My question is about the reduction in force. I saw emails saying that we were going to reduce by 25,000 over the next few years. And my question is there an end date? I saw the matrix of the career fields who are affected by this, and it seems like almost everyone. So are we going to have multiple years where we're continually putting in packages, trying to have retention, or is there an end date in sight?
So I think it might have been misquoted in some of the newspapers and so forth, but I think what has been said is up to 25,000. Now that could mean less than 25,000, right? But up to 25,000 is what has been projected. It's over the course of 5 years. However, help me here, gentlemen, I think the sooner we can do it within mission, probably the better. So is that correct? Mr. Corsi, would you join in?
What we're trying to do is keep all of the manpower adjustments synchronized with the force structure adjustments. So given the dollar changes, and that's pretty fluid right now that we have to sort out, we will keep the manpower linked with those changes. A lot of it right now is kind of front-loaded in the 15 and 16 timeframe. So what we would like to do is get as much of the force shaping done as soon as possible so we can get to a new norm and put stability out there. But that's our goal. But a lot is driven by the dollar dynamics and our force structure that will remain, given the budget.
And again, I'll tell you an industry story from my last 14 years, since I've been through a number of downsizings in the private sector. I've done it and seen it done both ways. I've seen it done over 3-4 years, trying to achieve an integration into downsizing and so forth, and I've seen it done in 1 year. And intuitively, you might think, gosh, 3 or 4 years, maybe that's better, because it would be easier on people, it would be more gradual. Again, I've done it both ways. I think it's better to do it in 1 year, as long as you can do it within mission requirements. And I say that because the sooner you can tell people what the future is likely to hold, give them the information, let them make a move, let them seize that opportunity, figure out what the next step is, it's much the best way to go, in my opinion. And I think that's the trajectory that we're on. Yes?
I'm BJ Casertano, and I work in General Counsel's office. You talked to 25,000. Was that active duty and civilian, or is it just active duty?
So that's just the active duty.
Are we looking at anything with the civilian side?
We are.
On the civilian side, they're pretty much, the numbers are fairly small on the civilian side. If you remember about 2 years ago, we had a major civilian adjustment of about 16,000, and we worked that very hard using the voluntary process. So, we tried to communicate to folks using the voluntary side to let everybody know the 16,000 civilian positions that we reduced, actually Air Force-wide, 100 individuals actually went out the door involuntary, working that 16,000. With all the effort through the commands and keeping vacancies and stuff, we have built up a huge amount of vacancies, a lot of it driven by the dollar dynamics. So whatever reductions that we will take, our hope is that we're going to be able to use a lot of those vacant positions, if they're in the right specialties, to work our adjustments. Probably the big unknowns is the headquarters adjustment that we will take. Okay, you've read the paper about a 20% reduction. We need to sort out how we're going to take that, and then we're going to work the adjustments accordingly. But again, we have a significant amount of vacant positions, and we hope to use those to mitigate most of the reduction.
I have a question I'd like to throw out to all of you. So if you could change one thing in our Air Force, what would it be? So everything's that perfect. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Please.
Ma'am, Sergeant Bloodgood, I work for DHA. The one thing, the flow of communication.
The flow of communication. No, can you tell me more?
Such as getting the same message multiple times a day, whereas if the message comes directly,
Is it too much communication, meaning repetitive, or not enough?
No, but sometimes it seems like by the time I get the message,
It's too late, maybe.
not too late maybe, but it's everyone else, like, it's already been known.
Okay, all right.
And
so-
sometimes the communication just doesn't get to where it needs to go or to everyone.
So my experience on this is you can never do too much communication. So even if it at times appears repetitive, you know, a person can just hit delete and not reread it, for example, but you can never do too much of it. And every organization I've ever worked for, we struggle to, you know, do it right, do more of it, and so forth. And it is constantly difficult to get it down, you know, into the different layers of an organization. So again, back to the industry world, a CEO can talk to his or her direct reports, and boy, they heard it, they got it, but then they've got to turn around and communicate it. And then the next level has to communicate it, and I'm sure that's the way it is here as well. So, I mean, I will take that on board, and you know, that was one of my 10 points, is the importance of communication. So I absolutely believe in it, and we'll try to do better. Yes. I knew this would be a hot topic. What are we going to change?
Ma'am, one thing I would look at changing is trying to figure out how we can reward, retain deep specialization in our Air Force in the uniform side of the house.
Okay.
There's been a tradition of more toward generalization and trying to build every airman to be the next chief or the next chief of staff. And in today's world, in things like cyber, space, language, region, and culture, you need deep specialization, but we tend not to reward that. We tend to send some folks and give them deep education up to their PhDs, and then we lose them as majors. How do we really get the return on that investment when we put somebody in a region for 6 years and try to retain that capability?
What do you think the answer is? Is it bonuses? Is it, what would you say to
Well, ma'am,
suggest?
to understand that in some specialties, not for all of them, I mean, if you're going to be the A3, 5, or the 8, or the TJAG, you can't necessarily specialize in one substrata. But if you can tell some of them that if you want to be the attaché in Eurasia with repeated assignments so that you know that region, you speak that language, or if you want to be a litigator in the JAG Corps and be the best litigator for the most complex cases, that there's a place for you to survive and to reach within a substrata. If you want to be a human case officer, it's a tremendous investment, highly specialized, and you can't just pop in and out of those kinds of jobs. But I don't know that we've looked at creating a substructure, a special skills program that will allow that kind of specialty to nurture. Because in the cyber business, if you walk out for a year, we're going to have to retrain you.
Right.
But if you try to stay in cyber for 6 years, we've had folks who, in our enlisted force, who say, I really don't want to test for master because I'm going to be a supervisor and I'm going to get off the net and I can't do those things I really love doing and I want to do.
Okay. That's a good one. Thank you. Yes.
Chief Master Sergeant Jack Johnson, Jr. I work in the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Ma'am, in my 30 years, this centers on development of our enlisted force, and I think enlisted through and through. And I think Chief Cody's doing a marvelous job with our development. But as I look around, we do a great job in developing our officer corps, and whether it be staff jobs and so on. But I would like to see, you know, as members in this room go on to command, that when you have your staff meetings, you have your meetings, bring an enlisted person with you. In my 30 years and the levels in which I've worked, many times I look around and we're not there. And many of our enlisted folks have graduated valedictorian, highest levels within their class, whether high school and through college. But yet, they're not represented in some of the senior messages.
Okay.
So when you go out and you open the hangar doors, or you go to guard mount, the person standing before those young airmen look like myself. but it would be nice to have them represented, just at least in the room, to hear and to grow on what our senior leaders are doing. And I think some would be surprised in the feedback they would receive from that leader. It could be a master sergeant, a senior, or a chief. But to bring the thoughts from those airmen back to the table, which I think will have, in many cases, a different perspective as we make decisions as we move our Air Force forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you please see Major Lake? Where are you, Major Lake? Yeah, I'd like to follow up on this suggestion. If you could please check in with him, and we'll talk later. Thank you.
David Diaz, South SP. I'll follow up actually on the Chief's statement. Mr. Byland actually, in previous years, has done a great job for civilian career development, but I think we need a little bit more.
More of that.
Moving forward, yes, ma'am.
Across the board, or
I think across the board, yes, ma'am. In terms, I was an officer for 4 years, and I can tell all the officers how to make general, but I can't, in a good way, tell civilians how to make SES, and how to. There's no really well-defined career path. In some career fields there are, but not in all of them. So I would say just work on that a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'm Major Hamilton from SCX. With your experience with military comp and pen on the Hill, can you talk about your thoughts on the military retirement system and the proposed changes that are in Congress right now?
So, did you say the proposed changes on the Hill now? Is that what you said? Okay. So, in general, my thoughts on the military retirement system is that over time, it is likely to change for new entrants into the force. So that is to say, this is my guess now. I don't know this with any kind of certainty. And there is a commission which has been charged with looking at the all of military compensation, not just retirement, but retirement would be part of it. The growth in the costs of the benefits, of course, has been large, and there's concerns that it's taking up too much of the available defense resources. So what can we do? So one of the proposals that's been on the table is to somehow change the retirement system for new people coming into the force. So that way they know what the system is, and it's not the breaking faith aspect as it would be if you were to change it for people currently in the force. So if I had to guess, it's not going to change for people in the force, but at some point in the future, perhaps it'll change for new people coming in. And how will it change? Not sure. There's a variety of proposals on the table. Now, as to this COLA -1, which was passed as part of the budget agreement, the thing that sort of gripes me about that is that it was taken as one idea that sort of hit one group of people rather than a comprehensive plan that hit a number of benefits, if you will, for a number of different types of people. If you look at the actual proposal, it doesn't, to me anyway, seem that extreme, right? It's 1% less in the increase for, fairly young retirees. I think they're definitely going to fix it for people who are disabled, but the so-called working, the working age under 62 people to get a little bit less of that increase, it doesn't seem so extreme. But why them? Why only them? Why wasn't it more comprehensive? As I said, that's the part that gripes me. So the leaders in Congress, at least some of them, have said they're going to relook this and so forth. So I think stay tuned. We're going to have to see where that goes. Okay. Oh, I got 2 more. I'm going to make time for 2 more.
First of all, thank you for taking the time to entertain these questions. Sean Epley from SAF AAIE, and my question is concerning Air Force cyber. What is your vision over the next few years for the Cyber Command, and how you see our role as cyber in the warfighting domain?
So it's a growing area. I mean, it is It penetrates everything in not only military life, but civilian life. So, I mean, here we are talking about career fields that are on the move and important and growing and so forth. That certainly is one of them. I can't say that I have an extremely well-defined vision of cyber to share with you at this point, other than it strikes me that although all of the services are involved with cyber, it seems like Air Force ought to be in the lead. We ought to be number one in that field. If we're not, maybe we need to find out why we're not and recapture that lead, if you will. So it certainly is an important area, and it's one that I need to get smarter on and focus on more for the future. And I think there was one more. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. My name is Dennis Powers. I work in SAF-AQ. And my question kind of relates to the background that you gave on your own career history as a young college student. You aspired to go into public service and government service. And I guess my question is, what can we do now to make a career in civil service attractive for young people? Because last year was not the best year for us. We had furlough. We had a few days we had to stay home. I'm a young college student, and I'm thinking, maybe I take that off my list because that's maybe not a good route to go. So wonder if there's any concern that, we're going to miss a whole generation of young, talented, imaginative young people that could come work for us.
Right.
And what's your thoughts on that?
So I absolutely know where you're coming from on that. I hope you're wrong. I hope we don't lose that whole generation of people, because we'll all be the poorer for it if we do. But I certainly know where you're coming from. And civilian employees, of course, have had 3 years of no pay raise whatsoever and furloughs and whatnot. And you listen to the rhetoric sometimes, it's very disheartening what people say. But and everybody in this room knows the importance of the work that you're doing. And I do feel that certainly if you talk to military personnel, as I have my whole life, one of the top things that the military always tells me is they're so driven by the mission and by what they work on, as well as the camaraderie. And so I hope that is the case for most of our civilian personnel as well, that there is camaraderie and there's working relationships and the importance of the work, on the interesting nature of the work. So this is also part of it. This is certainly what imbued me when I was a youngster, and it imbued me as an oldster when I have come back for another tour, you might say, in government. So as much as I loved my work at SAIC, and I was working on, I feel, very important projects there as well, there is just nothing to compare with the feeling of being involved with something that is so much bigger than yourself and which helps so many other people. So I would hope that all of us who are in government as civilians, we can talk it up a little bit. There's where we go for that positive leadership. And that's not the be-all and end-all, but I think it is important to a lot of people, is working on that, working on important missions and making sure that we return to some stability in the civilian world. So for example, we are not projecting, and I hope I'm right about this, and I hope nothing changes to make me wrong about this, but we shouldn't be seeing furloughs again in the coming year, and I hope we don't see them ever again. All right, well, I want to thank you all once again for coming and spending this time with me today, and I look forward to getting to know, many more of you personally and to the work that we have in the years ahead to keep our Air Force the absolute #1 Air Force in the world. So thank you so very much.